Walk, walk. There are so many things going on around. You must take heed. It's been written and prophesied about, so you must believe. Not everything that glitters is gold. Pay attention as it's been told. Join us every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, with Brother Yusuf as he tackles and breaks down current events, current news, and politics, and the Islamic Ummah. Please join us, streaming on all major platforms. Channel SunnahFollowers.
If you will. We got a pretty packed, all things happen, interesting things that lead into other potential lessons in the future. We're going to cover a lot today. We're going to look at some of the videos and highlights of the Kufar's Ramadan, as I call it, the spring break festivities, and some of the lessons that we can take from that. We are going to look at Donald Trump, tax cuts, deportation of green card holders for criticizing Israel. Look a little bit about Gaddafi today as well. I felt I wanted to talk about some of the programs he did and how it's relevant to us today. When we look at what some of the governments are doing or not doing. We're going to look at the Syrian situation, which is all too predictable, going exactly as I laid out 6 months ago when this whole thing was beginning, what they were going to do. We're going to get to that today as well. So, interesting week as I'm browsing through in my off minutes in the office. I'm getting spammed. And again, we've talked about this with the algorithms, the things that even though your search history doesn't ask for the stuff, they're going to give you what they want you to consume. And I started getting all of a sudden all these videos this week showing these spring break festivities. Now, this is really to my knowledge, the first Ramadan that's kind of paralleled with the Kufar version, if you will, where we refrain and try to battle our desires. They have entire festivities where they go out and openly embrace them. And I was seeing all these videos just coming in my feed, and sometimes you can't help but to watch, even though you shouldn't, just so you have a little bit of a pulse on what's going out there to help you better prepare your brothers and sisters, your children, your family members, particularly teenagers, in the household as to what is being appealing to them or being promoted, as appealing. And I mean, these festivities they have down in Florida and down in Mexico, I mean, debauchery is a kind word. I mean, you'll see every ounce of debaucherous, filthy activity that you can possibly imagine is going on down there. And again, how the hypocrisy of this society, they like to come down to us and talk bad about how we are a misguided religion. We're stuck in the 6th century. And then they'll herald this stuff as the epitome of progress. In fact, as I was looking at one of these, I saw someone had posted a meme. And the meme was a woman half naked in a bikini with a thong. And next to it were two sisters wearing full abayas and hijab. And they said two women, 1,600 years apart. And again, the message was that the progress was the woman in the bathing suit who was showing more skin than clothing. And I was happy that one Christian actually came in, appeared to be a Christian at least, and it said, this isn't the flex that you think it is. Because what you're doing is implying again that this over here is what represents us. And he was talking from the Christian perspective. They were not proud even of this. But again, this is stuff when you witness these things that really should, what I was talking about last week, get you to kind of elevate your chest up a little bit, walk with a little bit of pride. Because on one hand, we're sitting here and we're mastering our desires. We are perfecting the spirit, perfecting the deed, perfecting our consciousness, raising our vibration to positivity, to true triumph, while on the other hand, you are seeing them down there engaging openly, embracing every single vice known to man. And I talked about also how I was really disgusted. Me and Sister Layla were talking about this with some of the material that comes from our side and how you see some of these imams and these teachers, and they're teaching it like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how good these things are, and he's just withholding them from us. So that way we earn paradise. Turning away from this behavior is nothing that's earning anything. This behavior is not good for the body, the soul, the temporary fix that these individuals are getting is going to be overshadowed by the misery that's coming to them later in life. You know, the diseases that pass around these things, the devaluation of partners between husband and wife or man and woman. I mean, if you're a woman who's attending one of these festivities and you left there with 10, 12 men that you went to bed with during that period of time, how are you ever going to have what we call pair bonding? How are you ever going to look at one man and love him? It's almost impossible at that point. You've been psychologically twisted. And for the men, it's the same thing. When you're viewing women as just simply a temporary 10-minute pleasure fix, how are you ever going to be able to deal with the suffering that comes with a marriage, the conflicts, the inevitable disagreements, building trust, building things up, when you're so used to treating people as something that you discard like a dirty pair of pants or a dirty clothes? So this spring break is very synonymous with the downfall and why this Kufar civilization is coming to an end. It doesn't have much time. The only thing is, are we going to allow the leaders of this world to replace it with something much worse hidden behind the guise of something better? That's the main question here. But you see with them low birth rates, not married. I saw a report this week, 45% of women are estimated to be unmarried at the age of 40. Coming up here in the next 5 years, we're talking about half. And those numbers are just simply going straight up. They're not showing any signs of leveling out. When you start living this way, there's no end until the grave. You are going to have to keep on pushing it more and more extreme till you finally get your fix. And it's always the same when you see drug users. They start off with marijuana. They call them the harmless gateway drugs. Then you're going to see them progress to alcohol. Maybe alcohol was first, then marijuana. Then it becomes pills. Then it becomes tranquilizers. Then it becomes a bunch of chemicals you can't pronounce. Then it becomes heroin. Then it becomes the grave. And by that time, it's too late to mend or change. So there's a lot of powerful lessons that we can gain from looking at the Kufar behavior and how just open they are, with it. And just a reminder of how much on the right path we are, especially for those people who are new. Anytime you take Islam for the first time, there's always going to be, am I on the right path? You're looking for that reinforcement. Hopefully it's coming daily, hourly, but this is just another one of those situations where you really get that reinforcement. Now to some other news. I saw something interesting also this week, which was the food stamp crisis that's going on in this country, where they're now trying, this is a good thing, trying to remove sodas, candy, and other things from food stamp eligibility. And this, again, is very long overdue. If you're receiving help from the taxpayers, you should be encouraged to eat healthy foods. And I'll tell you why. For one, this is not your money. This is coming from the goodwill of the people. It's coming from their tax dollars, someone else's. If you are healthy and you're eating healthy, the more healthy you are, the more likely you are to be motivated, to feel good, both about yourself, your physical appearance, your mental. You're going to start thinking clearer. You're going to start wanting to go out there and actually get a job and better yourself. These sugars and all this crap that comes in a box, all of this is nothing more than a drug. Over 80% of the stuff that we see in these supermarket shelves was not food 50 years ago. It didn't exist. All these are Dr. Frankenstein creations filled with additives, dyes, poisons, and chemicals, which are affecting your ability to concentrate. That's why we have all these kids now. They say these kids have attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and they keep adding letters to these supposed conditions. What it is these kids are high on soda. They're high on sugar. They're constantly on a sugar high. They can't sit down and pay attention. And if you're not working, you need to get yourself together. You need to get yourself out there and actually be a role model to your family. And a lot of these people, they have children, and they pass on these bad habits, of course, to the children. But what's key in this story is who's actually opposing this. There was one of these bills in the state of Texas, and guess what? Who was opposing it on the other side, saying that this is too restrictive? The American Heart Association. Here is this organization. They got the nice little heart logo because they care, right? They're supposed to be focused on removing heart disease from the United States. Heart disease is the #1 killer in this country. During COVID, you had all the politicians, all the phony philanthropists like Bill Gates saying one death is too many. Even by the lying numbers where they just took the flu and called it COVID, that's all they really did. We'll get into that as I talked about later on after Ramadan. But you had all these people grandstanding about how much they valued human life and how much they couldn't let one person die. And then now, all of a sudden, you have the number one killer in the country. Nobody seems to care. You have the organization that's supposed to be responsible for encouraging healthy heart information is now out there protesting against removing things like sugar, which are one of the main causes of heart disease. For years, they lied to us and told us it was the butter, it was the healthy fats, it was the steaks. All the while, they were loading almost everything they could with sugar. The average American consumes 76 grams of sugar per day. This is over 3 times what you're allowed to have in a reasonable, healthy diet. You shouldn't have any refined powdered sugar, period. We saw when I talked about the Gulf, they're up in the 90s. Some countries are in the hundreds of grams. So if people are familiar with my work, I've often talked about how when you live in a backwards society, you understand how this system works, you'll see some key points come to light. Doctors are here to destroy health. They're not here to maintain it. This right here proves, in fact, just that. You see, educators are there to manipulate and destroy education. Historians are there to falsify history. You see, the Justice Department is here to destroy justice. Scientists destroy science. Remember COVID? Trust the science, trust the experts. And then a year later, after they got everything they wanted, they said, oh, yeah, we made it up. All that 6-foot stuff, we made it up. We didn't have no basis for it. The cloth mask, yeah, we made it up. And all the people like me are like saying, I told you so. But this is what they're here to do. When you go to a doctor, the number one killer of a profession is not going and dealing with a gang. It's not the Bloods and the Crips. It's the doctor. It's giving misdiagnosis, putting people on medication they have no right giving toxic drugs. And here you see, again, the Heart Association lobbying to keep food stamp benefits in junk food. I mean, you can't get more clear as day evidence that they all know what's going on. They know. They're here to poison us. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And this just, again, brings this to light. We are in an age of revelation. Everything is being revealed. It's revealed in hyperspeed now. When I was young, these things got you called kooky, and they wanted to put you in the loony bin. Now these conversations are happening all over, and it's a great thing. And in the Muslim community, I've seen a lot of this. Imams don't talk about it. I mean, there are some, alhamdulillah, but not enough. They typically ignore and hide in the dark on these issues. So we get into something else now. Our old friend Donald Trump, who we've talked about. There's Sister Layla put it up right there, exactly what I said. They're opposing this, and just ask the question why. You're on your way to finding out the truth about not just them, but every single aspect of this system is inverted. It's to do the opposite of what they claim it's there to do. We're going to talk about some inversion now again. Donald Trump is talking about eliminating the federal income tax to 150K. If you make under 150,000, you don't have to pay income taxes at the federal level. Now, I want to bring this to a disturbing light. Now, in a perfect world, this sounds great. This is cause for excitement. None of us want to pay federal taxes, especially sometimes I've had people come to me with the truth. I don't want to get the raise, sir, because if I get the raise, I jump to the next tax bracket and I'm at the bottom of it. So I'm going to be obligated to pay more in federal income taxes. I'm actually going to earn less after getting the raise. This system is illegal. It was put in place in 1913. But let's look at really what's behind this. And it's not as good as it may seem. So $14,600 is the threshold where if you make over that, you have to file a federal tax return. Now, if you're married, it's $29,200. Now, needless to say, if you try to live off $14,600 in this economy, I mean, you've got the blessings of Allah times 10. I mean, God with you. If you're able to do this without any kind of help or any kind of support. But this number is slightly moved up over the years to represent inflation, but it obviously has not moved up enough. This number is way, way outdated. When I first started, You know, if you had 75,000 or 90,000, you were basically considered wealthy back in the 1990s. In fact, I remember I had a friend whose mother was a doctor. And when I went to hang out at his house, it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I remember walking in the house, like 5 bedrooms, you had to yell, and somebody on the other end of the house couldn't even hear you. And I remember one day I asked him, I was like, well, how much is this house, you know, like worth? And he went and he asked his mother, you know, how much did she pay for it? And she said the house was valued currently at 426,000. She had paid about 390. So we're looking in 1994 during this period of time. That same house in that same neighborhood, I still know that neighborhood very well in the city I grew up in, is now 1.5 million. The value of the dollar, as we've talked about, is not even close to the same. Making 90,000 will soon be, at the rate we're going, the new $14,600. You are going to be considered to be low middle class. We're going to talk about that. Is it really middle, you know, here in a minute. So this is not the favor that it's marketed to be. You know, these are people who are making in this range, even though it seems great, they're struggling. You know, they're already paying a massive amount of their income in rent. Houses are out of control, you know, and we have to come to terms with this. That basically the middle class, we've been lied to for a very long time. They call the middle class, you know, between 60,000, you know, and about 300,000. Well, if Elon Musk and 300 plus billion, his net worth grows every day. I don't know what the latest figure is. If he's high, is this really the middle? I mean, you do the math. I mean, is someone who makes $90,000 or $100,000 really the middle? This is a lie. This is psychology. They are trying to trick you. Oh, you're in the middle class. You're in the middle, buddy. You're good, you know? You're great. No. If Elon Musk is the peak, if Bill Gates is the peak, if Bezos is the peak, if Zuckerberg is the peak, if the oil guys in the Gulf are the peak, I'm sorry, making 90,000, 150,000 is not the middle. No, the middle would be, you know, in the hundreds of millions, you know, or $1 billion range if you look at it comparatively. So this is not the extension that it seems. They're just simply adjusting for inflation and making you seem like you're getting a big, you know, benefit out of this. Granted, it's better than nothing, but it's not something to get over exuberant or excited about this. And we need to come to terms with this, of what really is the middle, because this is something that really would unite people. Because I remember when I was in Bahrain, when I was living over there, it's very common in the Arab culture, unfortunately, to treat the servers like absolute dogs. I was one time having a dinner, you know, with a guy that I worked with, and the way that he was talking to the waiter was just like, I mean, below, you know, like he was not even human. And I remember I stopped him and I said to him, you know, I want to ask you a question. It's just like kind of beamed into my brain. I really got it on the spot. I said, I want to ask you something. Is your salary closer to the waiters or to the CEO of your company? And he paused and he went for me. He's like, it's closer to the waiter. And I said, then whose side are you really on here? Does that CEO view you in the same light that you're viewing that waiter? And he got really paused. I said, I want to ask you even more. Is your salary closer to his or Bill Gates? Bill Gates was the richest man in the world at the time. And then he was like, yeah. And I said, well, who's on the same side here? You know, we are in the same class. You've been bought in again to your middle. This guy's low. You have this, you know, a little bit of a chest out. I'm better than him. I'm superior than him. I can treat him this way. But yet those guys, when they treat you that way, you say, oh, they're arrogant, they're full of themselves and all these things. People don't really reflect, you know, in that way to understand really the game. That man is our brother. That man is closer to our economic situation than these people that you're praising and heralding and all of those things. So just one I felt was a very valuable lesson that I had taught him that day. And I really give Allah, as always, all the glory for really implanting that analogy, that way of comparing into my mind at the time, really to get him to ponder and think about this. So as we move on, we got another story related to the current administration. We have Mr. Mahmoud Khalil. He was scheduled to be deported this week, green card resident, arrested by ICE. What was his crime? Protesting Israel. Now, the U.S. government does absolutely nothing. You can go look at the stories of the illegals. I've chronicled this here briefly and in detail who rape, kill, rob Americans. But the precedent is now set. If you're protesting Israel, this is just too much to tolerate. We're not going to tolerate this. This is beyond, our scope. Kill American, no problem. Come in, take over apartment buildings like the Venezuelans did in Colorado. The mayor did nothing. The police did nothing. But you protest Israel, this is where we draw the line. This is just too extreme. And people wonder why, again, the shape that we're in. And I had warned people from the first month, it's on camera and Sister Layla's website, about staying away from these protests. I talked about the Black Lives Matter, the Antifa, the violence, all the traps, all the things that they were using these for to demonize us and our cause and to usher in eventually hate crime rule. A crime is a crime. I've always resented the term hate crime. If you kill someone for the color of their skin, it's no different than if you killed someone for their gold watch. You are a disgusting, reprehensible human being regardless. There no designation should be there for hate crimes. Hate crimes were created for one reason and one reason only, from what we're seeing now, to ultimately silence speech. You can't criticize anything Israel does or you're anti-Semitic. I've met good Jews. I don't have any animosity towards them. This is not about them. There are plenty of Jews out there who stand up for what's right and wrong. We're not going to put people into containers and boxes. We don't like the same done to us. We're not going to do it to them. But to not be able to criticize a nation, a government of a foreign country is just, again, beyond the level of extreme. We obviously know what the reason for this is. Now, to go back to him, from a logical standpoint, I can't say that I'm against the U.S. government's decision ultimately if this wasn't for what's really behind the scenes. Because on face value, you have a foreigner in the United States who's benefiting. He was in a $90,000 a year Columbia University, $90,000 per year tuition to attend Columbia University. He's here to get from the West. He's here to work and make money in the West. And yet coming in here and criticizing the government that he openly chose to work with and to embrace. Us as Americans, we have a right to protest under our Constitution. If you're African American, you're Caucasian American, you're Native American, you're the people I talked about, the foundational stock. It's our tax dollars that go to these nations who are doing things that are against the interests of America, both from a religious standpoint as well as a secular standpoint. I made the secular case in my Palestine series, where I showed that the state of Israel was founded by breaking international law, by breaking the rules of human decency. We as Americans have a right to protest our government. But if you're a foreigner coming in here, let's say the situation was reversed and America was fighting a country that was actually on the wrong side for once. It doesn't happen often, I know, but let's play the hypothetical game. I don't want foreigners in my country trying to influence the right and wrong decisions, because obviously those people are going to have sympathies toward their homeland, whether right or wrong. But we as Americans have a right to protest where our tax dollars go. If I was to go to UAE, to Qatar, to Kuwait, to Jordan, and protest their governments as a non-citizen, hey, even if I was a citizen, we know what would happen to me. So there's a little bit of a deep meaning here that we can't get caught up in the emotion. Obviously, I know where this is going. That's why I'm against it. But at the same time, this gentleman is not a resident of the United States, not a citizen. He has no right to criticize the government of this country. He is a guest here. But at the same time, we know this is going to be turned on us as the native-born Americans, who our tax dollars are, again, funding this system. Lots of hypocrisy here. Now, going to Canada, our friendly neighbor to the north, we saw again, because one of the big challenges they always come after Islam is they say that Islam is not, it's not for democracy. That Islam is totalitarian, and how democracy is so beautiful of a system. Democracy liberates people, and they herald the EU. We're going to get to them in a minute too. They herald the United States, obviously, as the father, the champion, the constitutional republic, the best system known to man. We hear this stuff all the time. The Sharia is cancerous, is totalitarian, it's brutal, it's barbaric, but democracy is where it's at. So let's look at democracy in action, shall we? So Canada has a new prime minister, He's going to continue the global elites agenda. If you look up this guy, he worked for the Bank of England. He's got 3 passports, Rothschild connections. I mean, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. In fact, this guy is even more demonic, it seems, and connected even than Justin Trudeau. But the best thing is that this guy basically did not even run for office. He was never even elected to a local office. He didn't live in Canada. I said his experience was working in the Bank of England. The people never elected this guy. Justin Trudeau's party stepped down, and under their democratic system, they just simply put this guy into power. Kind of what the Democrats did with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, when she ran, she got 5% of the Democratic votes in a primary. Might have been less than that. That's just the number I'm kind of paraphrasing out of my memory right now. But it was something low like that. When she ran against Biden, she didn't win a single state. But yet this woman was put up there to run for the highest office in this great democracy when she never was even elected to win a single district or state in a national election in her own primary. We're seeing the same thing here in Canada. They are picking the leaders. Where are the values? This is value. This is a democracy. This is the best system known to man. This scumbag here worked for the Bank of England. You know where his allegiance is there. It's one of the biggest private banks controlled by the Rothschilds in the world. And yet this is now your new leader. We always hear again how good this is. And again, we have zero control. Let's go to Romania. Well, they elected someone that the EU didn't want. And now they're holding elections again. The best part is he can't even run. So the people elected who they wanted, democracy in action. Every vote matters, right? We don't like that guy. Let's find a way to disqualify him. We'll get that in a second. So here again, you see, in Europe, government wasn't enough on the national level. They had to take it into a collective, which is what they want to do here. This is why Trump is pushing for the 51st state. It's the North American Union. They want the same exact system here that you see in the EU. So you had this gentleman, Kalin Georgescu. He won the first round of the election in November. Then it was voided because of possible Russian influence. We've heard that excuse before. AKA, he was against the war in Ukraine. He was against the open borders agenda. He was against the globalist, climate agenda and all those things. So now he can't even run again. So again, the charges officially were that he was subverting the constitutional order and trying to install a fascist government. The EU is tyranny personified. They have constantly gone against the will of the people. They're actively destroying their people. If you're an EU citizen, you only have one course of action. And I know people don't like that kind of talk. I've been saying it for over 25 years. There's only one course of action. And it ain't civilized, because voting is not going to get you out of this mess. It's not going to happen. This is what voting gets you. If they can't install a puppet who's going to tell you all the things you want to hear, then you vote him in. He's going to do nothing. If they have a real deal, someone gets through the people love, they believe in his message, they want to implement it, they're just simply going to disqualify him. It is pure fascism, total dictatorship, what you see over there in the EU. And like I said, there's only one course of action. If those people want to have sovereignty, they want to have a real democracy, they're going to have to take to the streets and sacrifice. Nothing comes easy, because as we can see, both from Canada, here in the United States, in every single major European election, it's the same thing. You're getting the same exact people. All they're doing is making your situation worse. Each decade that passes, each election cycle that passes, you're more and more in the hole. Harder and harder to get out. If you don't take action now, you're going to settle for nothing later. That's just what it is. And we've been doing that in the United States for far too long. We settle for nothing now, we're going to get nothing later. And it just continues with the status quo. Now to turn to another upsetting situation we see in Syria, people being slaughtered, tribal conflicts and all these things breaking out, Alawites, Christians being killed. This again was very predictable. There was all these Muslims on social media back when this thing happened. They were doing it back with the Free Syrian Army. I lived in Saudi Arabia during the period of time. I was watching it firsthand then. They were saying, oh, mashallah, Bashar al-Assad is not a saint. Bashar al-Assad is not a hero, by any means. But at the end of the day, he was somebody that the global elite did not control. He was somebody who was in the way of what we're going to get to. What is their grand plan for that part of the world? Privatization, taking control of the oil, splitting Syria up, like Muammar Gaddafi said, to 5 different districts, along with Lebanon, and securing the groundwork for the greater Israel. So now as you have this situation, there's justification, eventually to go in there. Because the more this stuff continues, the West is going to saber rattle, and they're going to say, yeah, we've got to go in there and save these people. We've got to do something and all these things. And I always wanted to ask people, as I asked them during the time, who are these guys? Where did they come from? Who's training them? What is the end game? Have they ever attacked Israel, these guys? That's the question that needs to be asked. We see them killing Muslims, Sunni and Shia. We see them killing Christians. But do we ever see them attack the Zionists? And I think when you look at the history there, that's all you need to know. And this reminded me of a time I was working back in about 2005. I was talking back then in the break room, the place I was working, about the plan for the Middle East and what they were going to do based on my research and reading. And there was a guy who was listening to me sitting in the side. He worked for the United States military. And he came to me and he said, I was listening to you, and it's like, that's exactly what's going on. I was there. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I used to run security for the prisons in Iraq during the Gulf War. And what he said was happening was you were having guys coming in there with CIA credentials, top clearance credentials, and they were demanding, as he was the clerk who was processing paperwork, the release of the worst people they had in the Iraqi jails. They were asking for these people to be released. No reason, no justification. You follow orders, chain of command. He obliged. They did that, as everyone else in the facility did. He said they had innocent people in there, good men from Iraq who were in prison, with no justification, having their families in grief and agony, not knowing what happened to their husbands, their fathers, their brothers. These men were staying. But yet the worst of the thugs were being released to the United States. What happened to them? I think we see the answer in the Free Syrian Army and ISIS and all these people of exactly what happened. There was a famous event when Obama was in office where they were dropping supposedly supplies to rebels, but they just missed. And they happened to drop it to these people. And they had them on video, and they already knew how to drive tanks. They already knew how to operate the equipment. How'd they know? Who trained them? I think we know the answer when you look at the story, you look at the reality of what's going on, how they had this knowledge, who was training them, what they're there for. Now we're seeing, and again, all of these Muslims who came out and said, mashallah, in 2011, they're saying it now again. This is just, again, whether they're ignorant or openly involved in it, is just inexcusable. Nothing good is going to come out of this for us at all. In fact, we are going to see clearly what is going to happen to Syria over the next decade. It will be obvious. The Zionist apologist Ben Shapiro even said this, as predictable statement as they come. He said, and I quote, "There's a good chance that Christians will be slaughtered, but that is a good thing because Israel's enemies have been weakened." So Ben Shapiro, this great guy that all the Christians will say, oh, we believe in Judeo-Christian values, and we're Zio-Christians. Well, here's a Zionist, open Zionist, saying you getting killed is a good thing because it betters Israel's advantage there. It makes Israel's enemies weaker. We know Syria will be privatized. We know it will be controlled. This was the plan all along. And again, these imams and all these people are blindly cheering this on. Gaddafi basically said this famously. We're going to get to Gaddafi here as he related to all of this. He famously stated Syria will be split up along with Lebanon into 5 pieces. and Israel will extend its borders into Turkey. Gaddafi also talked about the migrant crisis that happened in Europe before it happened, where he said they were going to continue when he was gone or he was removed, they would continue to flood Europe, and this type of people would take over there as well. Now, Gaddafi, I remember when I was living in the Gulf and all the emotion and happiness that people there showed when he was killed. I mean, it was beyond disgusting, as we're going to see here in a few minutes, for those of you who are not familiar with this man. He was the last good leader that we had in the Muslim world. He predicted all of these things. He did so many good things to his people. We're going to see now why, in fact, he was killed. So let's talk about some of his programs, shall we? First point, Libya had no electricity bills. None. Can you imagine that in America? I just paid $150 in electricity this past month. Electricity was provided by this man free of charge. It was considered under Sharia, his interpretation of that, as a human right. There was no interest rates on loans. The banks were state-owned. The loans of the citizens by law was 0%. Gaddafi banned riba, keeping in line with Quran and Sunnah. He promised not to buy a house for his parents until everyone in Libya owned a home. Could you imagine Donald Trump saying he's not going to buy his 8th mansion until every American had their own home? Could we imagine? We've been so disconnected with accepting that leadership should be bad, that when we hear someone like this amazing man, doing all these things for his people, we're shocked. You know, again, all newlywed couples in Libya. So you got married, you started a family, you received 60,000 dinars from the government. And this would help you buy your own apartment, start your family, get your furniture for all these brothers there who are wanting to get married. They paid the dowry, the wedding parties. They would help you with get you on your feet, starting your married life. Education and medical treatment in Libya was completely free. Before Gaddafi, there was only 25% of people who were literate. When he left, 83% of the Libyan population was functionally literate. You compare that to the United States, where we have people probably close to a third now are illiterate as adults. You know, he had 83% literate after inheriting 25 under the globalist standard. If Libyans wanted to live and maintain a farm, they received free household appliances, seeds, and livestock. Contrast that again. United States, we let Monsanto and all these companies control our seeds. You have to buy seeds from them every year. They make seeds genetically modified with pesticides built into the genome, and the seeds won't grow year to year. They can't yield a return. You have to consistently buy Monsanto seeds. You're at their mercy. This man, here's the seeds. Grow, build. Farming is the backbone of our civilization. It's all yours. You want that task here, the government is going to help you. He wasn't just saying, here's money to sit on your butt. You're contributing to society. The government is going to support you in every way. Again, imagine that here. If you couldn't receive medical treatment in Libya, the state would fund them $2,300 in accommodation and travel for treatment abroad. If you bought a car, the government would pay 50% of the price. The price of gasoline was 0.14 per liter, 14 cents. Americans cheered when we paid $2.50 a gallon. The gas was there as the people's resource to benefit the people. What a unique concept, truly amazing. Libya had no debt outside. They had reserves of 150 billion. Guess where those reserves are? They're now frozen. Where are they going to be used? I think we're going to know the answer if you listen to me over the past, months to years. We know where that money is going to go. Again, since Libyans, as always, when you graduate from college, you have that dilemma that you spend all this time going to university and school and all these things. So guess what? The government would pay the average salary, introductory position of your degree until you found a job. All these kids now graduate American universities, $80,000, $250,000, $300,000 in debt. and they're working at a gas station because nobody wants to employ them because they don't have any experience, and they tell you we need H-1Bs because Americans aren't smart enough to do tech. When you've got all these tech graduates working at gas stations, I met some, not all of them, obviously, and it's a tragedy in this country. This man said absolutely not. Parts of all oil sales in Libya were directly linked, this is a big one, to the bank accounts of the citizens. When they sold oil internationally, the people got an equal cut based on their percentage, 0.01%. You would get contributions into your bank account to be enriched with the state. The state got bigger, it got more prosperous, you became more wealthy. Mothers, if you give birth, it never ends, does it? Mothers who give birth to children receive $5,000. 40 loaves of bread during his time, 40 cost 15 cents. You can't get even a loaf of the poisonous toxic bread they sell in Kroger, Publix, or Food Lion for cheaper than $3.50. You got 40 loaves for 15 cents during his time. He also implemented, lastly, the biggest irrigation project known as the Big Man Project to ensure that water was available in all areas of the country, even the remote aspects of the desert. Amazing man, amazing things that he did for Libya. And I was not aware of all these things at the time. It was in 2011 when all this was going on. I was aware of some of his contributions. I liked the guy from what I had seen. He seemed to be very genuine and the type of people that we really need in leadership. And I just remember how disgusted I was when I saw all these people in the Gulf, these average citizens, cursing this man, celebrating his death, drinking cups of coffee in honor of his death. What are you celebrating, you fools? I mean, you're celebrating your slavery. I mean, it was just so beyond disgusting. And I really, as being only a Muslim for basically about 2 years at that time, less than 2 years, maybe a year and 9-10 months. I mean, what is with this ummah? I mean, how destroyed are they mentally inside that they would celebrate the destruction of one of their own who was doing all these amazing things for the people, to empower the people. And you look at him as the bad guy. And then you look at what you have as some kind of bastion for goodness and bastion of Islam. I mean, just totally disgusting and really no excuse for it. I mean, beyond brainwashed sheep is the only thing nice, kind of the nicest I should say I can say. And now let's compare for my final close. I set him up to compare where we're at right now in the EU. Let's talk about that great democracy again. So they unveiled a plan this week to launch the digital euro. And as I talked to one of the sisters a few weeks ago about how they're going to do the money and their plan for the money. It's all laid out right here. We're going to see some key provisions of this digital euro. We see real-time transactions are tracked. We knew this was coming. They are going to know every single thing you spend, when you spend it, where you spend it. It's going to get better too. Don't worry. Potential for payment blocking. Oh, how nice. If you're not so nice and you say naughty things that they don't agree with in social media, on webcam, in Zoom rooms, YouTube, they'll go to their keyboard, they'll click some keys there, they'll hit delete, or they'll hit the block key. And all of a sudden, that money you've been trying to save up, can't use it. You're now a social threat. You're a social cancer. We're going to block you. You don't agree with this policy. You try to mobilize people to peacefully protest against it. You're cut off, just like that. Automatic tax deductions, I mean, we've already had that, nothing new here. They automatically deduct your taxes. Restrictions on cash withdrawals. Your own money, we already see this here. If you try to go in a bank, try to take out 20 grand or 30 grand. They will interview you like you just bombed the subway. You will get grilled, interrogated. It's my money. What are we missing here? I gave you the money. You make money off my money. We highlighted that with the fractional reserve lending last week. But I want my money back, and you're telling me I've got to go through all this process to get it? Well, they're just going to make it clear now. No. You got to be put on a waiting list, or you got to take it incrementally. Now, here is the kicker. They always bury the real gem in the end. And this sums up everything of where they're going. The money is going to be programmable, meaning it is going to have an expiration date. Can't make this up. It's right there. So what this means is your money that you earned this 2 weeks of work will expire because it's all on the blockchain. It's all programmed. Those credits that they issued you are on the blockchain. So if you don't spend this money in 2 to 3 weeks, which are probably going to offer you so little money, you probably have to spend it anyway, they are going to simply turn that money off. It will no longer exist. You can't use it. So guess what? There goes the savings. There goes any chance of upward mobility. What little you have left of saving, investing, growing your wealth, trying to be someone who maybe down the line could possibly mobilize and compete with them or organize. No. Programmable money, expiration date. You are a slave. You spend everything you got in your credits for this work period, or we're cutting it off. The end. No chance of saving, no chance of upward mobility in the society. You are going to be locked in to your class, to your job, to the day you die. And there will be zero chance of anyone ever being able to compete with them. And as I talked about, the EU is tyranny on steroids. How anyone can look at this and think pride in being a member of the EU, pride that your nation is a member of the EU, and looking at the EU as anything other than what it is. It is a tyrannical dictatorship hell-bent on ruining your quality of life and bringing you back to serfdom. That's what it is. It's what it's always been about, and we're seeing it now coming to fruition in real time. This goes online in October of this year. So close on that one. As always, we'll take questions and discussions about some of the news that we cover or other things that you guys would like to ask. Sister Layla, it's all on you.